Hi, I'm Josh Gitalis, clinical nutritionist, and I got to interview Alissa Hamilton, who has a PhD from the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. She really honed in on a specific topic here. She wrote a book on orange juice called Squeezed and all about the orange juice industry. And in this interview, we talk about the industry, who owns things like Tropicana, what goes into making it, what the different labels mean and the different claims that they have on the products. And we also went off onto some pretty interesting tangents. I hope you enjoy the interview. Hello everyone, we've got Alissa Hamilton here, and she knows quite a bit about orange juice, and we're going to get right into it so we can not waste any time talking about this important beverage here in North America and most of the world. So first question, Alissa, is why did you get so interested in orange juice particularly?
Well, that is a good question. It actually started as a PhD dissertation in environmental studies, and I was interested in just generally the effect that the processed food industry is having on the growing of major agricultural crops. And I thought orange juice would be a perfect product to look at, because what is orange juice but squeezed oranges, the raw agricultural commodity? So there's a pretty smooth transition between the growing and the processing.
Definitely. Okay, and in a nutshell, what actually goes into making orange juice?
Oh, well, that depends on what product you're talking about. I focus in Squeezed on not from concentrate because of the premium that we pay for a product that is supposedly a fresher product and, more natural, pure. That's how it's advertised. But in fact, so that's not from concentrate. There are many orange juice type forms on the market. There's also from concentrate. In Canada, we still even have frozen concentrate in cans, which they long ago got rid of in the U.S. because of it's simply too inconvenient for most people. But so not from concentrate, what they do is they store the juice in these huge aseptic storage tanks. And what that means is, and this is so that they can have 365-day supply, consistent supply. They have these huge tankers, and they strip the juice of the juice of oxygen going into the tank, so that the juice doesn't go bad in the tank, so it doesn't oxidize. Right. And when they strip the juice of the oxygen, they also strip it of the flavor-providing chemicals that are natural to the juice. So the juice coming out of the tanks wouldn't taste like anything that you would squeeze in your house. And so they hire flavor and fragrance companies, to the same ones, that make like Calvin Klein perfume, and they hire companies to make flavor packs to add back to the juice to make it taste fresh and also give the product its signature flavor. So each brand, you may have noticed, a lot of people become very loyal to a specific brand, for instance, Tropicana, and what you're tasting, what you're attracted to is in fact this engineered flavor pack. It's not the oranges that are squeezed.
Right. That is pretty interesting. So and I think most people intuitively know when they taste the difference between a freshly squeezed glass of orange juice and what we might get in a carton.
Right. Well, although these days, people have become so distant from what actually fresh squeezed juice tastes like. I've spoken to a lot of people that prefer the processed juices because there is this sort of flavor. You get hit by this flavor that is a little bit less nuanced than what you might, what the taste that you would experience in a fresh squeezed juice.
Right. Yeah.
So I think our taste buds are becoming maybe more desensitized to subtle nuances that nature provides us. But I actually also forgot to mention in my description of what not from concentrate is the whole process. Of course, it's a pasteurized orange juice, and that's another key distinction. So the juice isn't that's how it's advertised. It's never been concentrated. It's never been boiled down, and that's where all of those claims of being pure and simple and fresh come from. This idea that you're not concentrating the juice, which is what from concentrate obviously comes from concentrated juice, frozen concentrate.
And I understand that the marketing tactics of a lot of these...
Sorry.
Little dog action back there?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I understand that the industry uses a whole variety of tactics to mislead the consumer. And one example that I read in your book is this phrase, tree ripened. So
yes.
why is tree ripened misleading for orange juice?
Well, because oranges, you would hope they ripen on the tree. You don't pick oranges. That term applies to fruits such as tomatoes, and which are often not tree ripened, and then you pick them and they ripen over time. Even if you have your own garden, you can notice that if you can pick a tomato somewhat green and it will ripen on your counter. That's not the case for oranges. They don't ripen after you pick them. So all oranges are, you would hope, tree ripened.
Yeah, and I know you're living in Toronto and I'm living in Toronto, and I look out my window and I don't see any orange trees. So,
yeah.
So we've been kind of conditioned. So where do the oranges actually come from?
Well, and that's another story. Most of the oranges, the industry started in Florida, and that's where, by far, Florida was the largest producer of oranges for juice in the world. And then in the 1980s, as the industry began to grow, actually even a little bit earlier, but the big companies started to look to other countries that could supply more oranges, and Brazil was really the target because they had fewer environmental regulations and cheaper labor, which was obviously probably the biggest key, because it would be a cheap source for them to a cheap supply. And so the industry really gradually shifted to Brazil in terms of, now Brazil by far is the biggest grower of oranges for orange juice. And interestingly, with this buy local movement, I think consumers are becoming more aware of where their food comes from. And in January last year, there was a scare because they found that juice imports from Brazil had detectable levels of this fungicide called carbendazim, which had been banned in the U.S. for use on oranges for years. And so there's a big scare, and since then, you can decide whether it's coincidental or not. Pepsi has has actually committed to sourcing all of its oranges for its not from concentrate from Florida, and similarly Coke just made a major investment in orange groves in Florida, and these are the two companies that were the first to leave Florida for cheaper oranges in Brazil in the 80s when the industry was growing. So it's a really interesting reversal that I think is in part due to consumers' awareness about where food is coming from and interest in buying locally.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of stuff goes on behind closed doors with these companies that we don't really know about, and it's just the theme that happens over and over with different foods. So
exactly.
And, back to the marketing and these misleading terms, you mentioned actually when I was speaking to you before the interview that there's some lawsuits going on with these companies.
That's right. Yeah, the lawsuits are based on really this huge gap between how the products are advertised and what in fact you're getting. And the focus right now is on the not from concentrate because of these slogans. There's so many slogans that they use that are deceptive. Squeezed from fresh oranges is another one. You mentioned tree ripened, but squeezed from fresh oranges, that was a slogan for a while that you could find on Tropicana cartons. And again, you would hope that the oranges were fresh when they were squeezed, but for the hurried consumer rushing, to pick up some orange juice, it looks a lot like fresh squeezed when you say squeezed from fresh oranges. There's a big difference between fresh squeezed juice and squeezed from fresh oranges. Again, it's a sort of meaningless term that's deceptive if you're not paying attention. They have even not from concentrate, the big category. That term came about in the 80s, and there's a bit of a story behind that, but Tropicana was starting to compete with basically before first there was pasteurized orange juice, and that was a really convenient product, and there was pasteurized and frozen concentrate. Frozen concentrate was cheaper but also less convenient because you had to reconstitute it.
Right.
Then the frozen concentrators realized, that consumers, this is just too much hassle for them. Why don't we reconstitute this frozen concentrate for them? So the frozen concentrators started to make this product Recon, which you can find next to pasteurized orange juice in the refrigerator section of supermarkets, and it's cheaper than pasteurized orange juice because you can imagine you're storing it in a concentrated form and then reconstituting it versus pasteurized orange juice, you have to store a full strength juice, and that takes a lot of space.
Right.
I mentioned these aseptic storage tanks. They're huge tankers.
Yeah.
And so pasteurized orange juice producers like Tropicana had to figure out, what do we do now? We have this competition with a cheaper product that's just as convenient. Used to be that we were the only real convenient product on the market. So should we give up on pasteurization, and should we all just reconstitute, go the concentrate route and then provide consumers with reconstituted orange juice? Or should we try and convince consumers to pay more for our product? And Tropicana decided to go the latter route. So they decided that's where this term "not from concentrate" came. Basically it was a board meeting at Tropicana, and the higher-ups decided, well, let's give it a try. Let's see if we can advertise this as a pure, fresher, simpler product than from concentrate. And let's call it "not from concentrate," So there you go. You have this product that is supposedly, it's not something. Actually, the marketers in the room, it's marketing 101 that you don't advertise something as not something.
Right.
But they were wrong, and it worked, and consumers bought into this myth that pasteurized orange juice is a fresher product. But as I mentioned, these aseptic storage tanks, the juice can sit in there for over a year. That's why they strip it of the oxygen, because they want it to be able to last for long periods of time. So you're not getting a fresher, simpler, more pure product, and you're paying more for it. And that's where the lawsuits come in, because consumers, I've talked to so many people who actually think that not from concentrate is a fresh squeezed product.
Right.
And that's why they're willing to dish out an extra $1 or something for a carton of not from concentrate versus from concentrate. My advice, I mean, I don't drink any juice, but if you really like if you know what you're getting and you're prepared to pay that extra money because you like the flavor better, well, that's fine as long as you know what you're getting. And that's, again, what the lawsuits are about, that consumers are not generally aware of what they're getting.
In your research, have you found this type of deceit in any other food products?
Well, I was very focused on orange juice, so I wouldn't want to talk about anything else.
Right.
That's what I became an expert in. Maybe in a few years I can let you know if I become an expert in another product. But I'm sure there are many products out there. I think orange juice is a perfect case study for this just more general lack of transparency in production processes, and that is changing, actually. I wrote the book a few years ago, and already there's been a huge shift in consumer awareness and demand for this kind of information about how their food is produced. But when I was writing, really, back then, we took it for granted that we had a right to know what's in our food. So, for instance, the nutritional content, you look at the back of a carton and you can see how many calories and some of the vitamins and minerals. And although that's actually another issue with orange juice, the vitamin C that you see on the label is the vitamin C that existed in the carton when it was packaged. Now, there's a long period of time between when it's packaged and when you open it and when you finish it. So who knows what those levels are by the time it's what's a 60-day shelf life, and then you open it in your fridge and it sits there.
Right.
So that's another issue. But we took it for granted that we had a right to know what was in our food, and yet knew very little about how food is produced. And that definitely is changing with a lot of the scares, with the pink slime and other food scares have alerted consumers to how little information we know. And I always say, leaders of the good food movement say that we can vote with our forks 3 times a day for better, more sustainable, and more healthy foods. But unless we have more information about how food is produced, we can't. And if we demanded as little information from our politicians as we do from our food providers, the right to vote would be a sham. So we're getting more information, but we need to still push there's always resistance and always this, backward movement towards secrecy and lack of transparency. And we need, now there are all the ag-gag, laws coming out so that to stop reporters from going undercover and exposing what goes on in the slaughterhouses. I mean, all of that is part of the same problem, just a more general problem of lack of transparency. And it's I'm talking very specifically about how food is produced versus what's in our food versus how it's produced. I mean, already what's in our food is we don't have enough information about that. But on top of that, the production processes are even less forthcoming. The companies are less forthcoming with that information.
Absolutely. So I've got a bit of a funny story for you. When I was in grade 5, I had a teacher that when someone would bring an orange or a tangerine to class, she would take the peels and eat them. So back then, of course, we all thought she was crazy. But is there any benefits of actually not eating the meat of the orange?
That's very funny because I eat. That's what of course, I would caution if you're going to do that, be sure it's organic. Although these days, even organic, I learned recently that they use organic growers are allowed to use antibiotics on apples. So there's certainly organic is no longer, I don't know if it ever was a guarantee of purity, but the long and the short is when I eat an orange, I eat the whole thing, and I use the peel for cooking. There's a lot, the pith is one of the most healthiest parts of the orange. It's full of bioflavonoids, and people just it's so funny. I always remember seeing in school, kids would bring those little clementines to school and pick away all the little
right,
ones.
right.
That's a thing.
Yeah.
You pick out all the, I don't know why clementines specifically, but that's some of the best stuff is in that white, in the pith. And yes, in the peel also, like I said, it's so, even just putting a little bit of the peel into a glass of water, it makes a lot of people say, oh, I can't, we're supposed to drink water and I just don't like water. Well, if you just put a little bit of the peel into the water, it adds a really nice flavor and sort of softens the water. There are many uses. I just hate discarding any part of any food. I try and find a use for it all. Actually, I watched your video about using corn silk if you are retaining water and you need a diuretic. And I discovered last year I was, buying corn from the farmer's market, and all the silk I was just conditioned to throw away. And I thought, why am I throwing this away? I wonder what it tastes like. And it's kind of like spaghetti. It's like angel's hair. I put it in the steamer with the rest of my veggies, and I have this feeling that there's so much good in so much of what we discard, and a lot of it is just instinct. I taste the peel of the orange, and I just feel like there's got to be good stuff in there. It tastes, it has a strong, and it's got a bit of bitterness, but it's got a very complex flavor that I feel must be full of good things.
I love the way you think, Alissa. So any projects coming up for you?
I'm actually currently writing a book on milk.
Oh, cool.
So,
love that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting, just the different opinions about it, and my basic message, it's not a new one, but there are many angles that I'm looking at, but it's simply not essential, and it just is incredible to me that the FDA, the USDA, the guidelines are still 3 glasses of milk a day, which is essentially, first of all, I have many questions about that, but it's almost like calcium gets to be its own food group. Dairy is the only food that gets to be its own food group, and on top of that, the recommendations are based solely on how much calcium the government thinks we need. So 3 glasses a day is 1,000 milligrams. Why do we need to get all our calcium from one source of food? First of all, and second of all, it's on the high side. The recommendations for calcium are on the high side. It's the only nutrient. It's the only mineral vitamin that is on the high side. For instance, vitamin D. Everybody says you need far more than what the government recommends. Well, calcium is the only one where there's some controversy that perhaps 1,000 milligrams is too much. Apparently, in many African countries where osteoporosis rates are far less than they are here, people live on 300 milligrams a day. So you got to wonder why the one food that has the one nutrient that comes from a product that has a heavy lobbying groups behind it, why that is the one that is potentially on the high side in terms of what we need. But those are all other issues.
Definitely. You've opened a big can of worms there. I'd love to talk all about milk. When your book comes out, I'd love to speak with you again, because I'm really passionate about that topic as well.
Yeah, me too. And it's something that's very dear to my heart. Growing up, actually, my mom, we never drank milk. We had yogurt in the house. My mom was very reasonable. It wasn't like you have to drink milk. And I would go to other kids' houses, and everyone, would have a glass of milk with their dinner, or breakfast, or milk with their cereal and milk with their lunch, and then there are all the school milk programs. The only time I ever had a glass of milk, I think, was we used to drive like 40 minutes outside of the city to this farm with a woman who had raw milk, and we'd come back with a big jug of milk, and it was such a treat to me. I loved it, but we just never had glasses of milk at home except if we went to Mrs. Doggy's and and brought back. And so now, again, that's so the book actually is my mom and dad both fairly recently passed away, and it's a tribute also to my mom's way of thinking, which was just, she was just so ahead of her time. I mean, of course, now the raw milk debates are all raging, and she wasn't a fanatic about anything, but if we were going to drink milk, it was going to be raw.
That sounds great. I'm really excited for that to come out. But The Squeezed, where would people find it or find you if they wanted to pick up a copy?
It should still be. It was actually we're in Toronto, so it was at Book City for a while when it came out. I mean, I'm just, I like to encourage independent bookstores, but of course it's on Amazon, and you can order it online, and it's basically, it shouldn't be a problem to find. Yale Press also. You can buy it directly from them online, and there's a blog, www.yalebooks.com/squeezed, and there's all kinds of information there about the book and about orange juice, some of the interviews I've done, and the lawsuits. Keep your eye out for the latest with the lawsuit, which I had mentioned to you earlier, was that the judge dismissed Coke's motion to dismiss the case, and so that's good news. So it's moving forward to discovery. The lawsuit is based on the fact that the companies, the deceptive advertising around Not From Concentrate. So it'll be interesting. That could prove to be a really important case study, a precedent going forward, and the case is focusing on words like natural. Like, what does that mean? Natural is one of the, well, there are many terms that aren't regulated, but it's one of the key ones that people are starting to look at more closely because it's so widely used in the industry now, and it's entirely unregulated. So these claims, of products that are natural. So that's the focus of the lawsuit as well, that one word.
Wow, okay. I see you have lots to talk about.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry I could go on.
No, I like it.
I'm very, enthusiastic about the research that I do, and I love communicating it to people who are interested in listening.
That's great. Well, we'll definitely
spend
have to
so much time at my computer, writing and reading. It's always such a joy to actually talk to people.
Definitely, we'll have to do this again then.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, thank you so much, Alissa.
Good luck with your practice and with your work.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Okay, take care.
Okay,
bye.
Bye.